After being rescued from falling off a cliff, I suddenly stopped pestering Nathan. I no longer chased after him, showed concern for him, or tried to please and accommodate him. Instead, I locked myself in the Buddhist hall and devoutly recited scriptures. Even when he came to my door and said he wanted to break off the engagement, I just nodded and said, "Okay." Then I continued to come back and kneel down and beg, "Buddha bless, Buddha have mercy." Under that cliff, I was poisoned and had no choice but to defile that young master. Just that one night, there should be no pregnancy, right? He can't possibly find me, right? Holding up my skirt in my hand, I ran desperately in the forest. My body was in intense pain as if being split apart, but I didn't dare to stop at all. Last night under the cliff, driven out of my senses by the drug, I pounced on a handsome young man who seemed to be in a hurry and was also injured. I tightly bound his wrist with my belt, like the most despicable prostitute. I rubbed and gasped in his arms, kissed and flirted by his neck. "Young master, don't be afraid. I'm not a bad person and won't hurt your life. I'm just a little hot. I want to ask young master to relieve the fire in my body for me. Young master, I want to touch you. Young master, I want to kiss you. Young master, I want." And that young master, perhaps really unable to break free, seemed to resign himself. He let me take advantage and defile him. Almost the whole time he didn't say a word. Only at the moment when I reached the peak of pleasure and screamed in ecstasy, he whispered coldly in my ear, "If Ming can't kill you, I am not worthy to be called a human." It's not an exaggeration at all. That short sentence carried a very deadly and menacing killing intent. So much so that when I think about it now, I still feel a chill from the bottom of my heart. So after waking up in the morning, without hesitation at all, I put on my clothes and ran away. I was afraid that if the young master woke up a little later, he would kill me directly. Oh, actually, he doesn't need to kill me. In this royal hunting event, the emperor, accompanied by the empress and princes, came to the hunting ground in person. Almost all the civil and military officials, noble sons, and ladies of the whole dynasty are staying in the tents all over the mountain. If people find out that I defiled a young master last night and lost my virginity before marriage, I really don't need to live anymore. Miss. Thank God you're okay. A cry with a sobbing tone suddenly rang out beside my ear. I was so scared that I shuddered all over. Looking up, I saw my personal maid, Jasper, with red eyes running towards me. Behind her was also my fiancé Nathan. And a group of princes, ladies, maids, and guards. My heart sank straight down. It's over. It's going to be over. Last night at the hunting feast, the third prince set up a floating wine cup poetry gathering by the pool at the edge of the cliff. I don't usually like lively occasions. It's just because Nathan would be there that I came along. But I didn't expect that in such an occasion and under the eyes of everyone, someone would dare to tamper with my wine. After just one cup, I felt dizzy, hot, and my vision blurred. I sensed something was wrong and hurriedly went to find Nathan, wanting to ask him to send me away. But several young masters were drunk and started to boldly tease me. "Nathan, Arya is extremely beautiful and is deeply in love with you. Why are you so unromantic and want to break off the engagement with her several times? Look at our Arya. In order to keep you, she even uses the trick of pretending to be drunk and offering herself. Nathan, if you really don't want to marry her, then I'll take the credit for escorting the beauty." Yes, I want to too. I've been thinking about Arya for a long time. Nathan, if you don't want this beauty, we are waiting to show our attentions and pick up a great bargain. Everyone joined in the fun, but Nathan's expression was indifferent. His distant gaze swept over my flushed face as if I were drunk, paused slightly. Then his thin lips opened and closed indifferently. "As you please. If you want to send her, then send her. It would be even better if you have the ability to make her never bother me again. For so many years, being bound by the marriage contract from our mother's wombs and being entangled and tied down by her as a burden, I'm already thoroughly fed up." As soon as these words came out, the whole place burst into laughter. Several young masters immediately walked over with a smile and forcibly took away Jasper. They dragged me, who was completely powerless, and walked towards the door. Nathan, don't worry. Your brother here will definitely do everything possible to satisfy Arya. Guarantee to save you from this bitter sea and break off your engagement. What happened later, I can't remember clearly. I only remember someone hugging me and taking me to the carriage. Nathan seemed to kick over the table behind me, and cups and plates fell to the ground. I pushed someone away and knocked someone down. Finally, I lost my footing, my body was in the air, and I rolled down the cliff. From the top of the cliff, there was a panicked shout faintly, Arya. That cliff is so high, and the forest is so dense. Several guards who were looking for people got lost. I was really scared to death. Miss, where were you last night? Hey, Jasper, I interrupted Jasper in a hurry. I forced a dry smile and pulled the corners of my mouth. Aren't I okay now? Don't ask anymore. What I did last night can't stand being asked. Besides, don't ask here. With everyone present and watching, if that young master wakes up and chases after me, I'll die here. Thank you all for coming to look for me under the cliff. I will never forget your great kindness. Stopping everyone, my eyes were always looking at the carriage outside the forest. I was guilty and anxious and couldn't stay still for a moment. Just last night I was frightened and truly terrified after the event. Why don't we just disperse for now? Everyone can continue to go back to the cliff top and enjoy the flowing wine cups and have a good time drinking and chatting. I will go back to my residence first. Farewell. After saying that, I bent my knee as if performing a courtesy salute. I was as if on fire under my feet and lifted my skirt to run out of the forest. Nathan, who had been silent since we met, suddenly grabbed my wrist. He pursed his thin lips and looked at me with an inexplicable expression. I'll escort you. Last night, it was my fault for not protecting you well. No need. I was so scared that my tone rose and I waved my hands repeatedly. There's no need to trouble young Master Nathan. I can manage on my own. Nathan's hands suddenly froze in midair. His dark eyebrows slightly knitted together. There was a contradiction and restlessness in his eyes that I couldn't understand. Young Master Nathan? 04 Yes. I nodded, took a step back aloofly and distanced myself from him. Last night I was presumptuous and insisted on asking young Master Nathan to escort me. It was Arya being ignorant. Now the coachman and Jasper are here. I can go back by myself. There's really no need to trouble young Master Nathan to escort me. Suddenly, there was a moment of silence around. Everyone stared at me in astonishment. Nathan also stared at me for a long time with his eyes downcast. His eyes were deep, as if there were some emotion surging that I couldn't understand. But in the end, it only turned into a faint sneer. If you can really completely wake up and stop pestering me, I'll be more than happy. Rather than putting on an act here, I really hope that when I come to your door again to break off the engagement, you can stop. Okay. I hurriedly nodded and agreed readily. If young Master Nathan comes to break off the engagement again, I will definitely not beg to persuade someone to stay. Again. In this way, the parents of both families who have always supported me should no longer make things difficult for him. But somehow, although I finally agreed to break off the engagement, Nathan didn't show joy. Instead, he suddenly froze as if his expression had stopped. A hint of darkness flashed in his eyes. You. Anxious in my heart, I had no intention of waiting for his hesitant words. I hurriedly bowed to everyone and said goodbye. Then I turned around and got on the carriage. Jasper followed me blankly, looking at me pulling down the carriage curtain like a thief. She was a bit stunned. Miss, am I not dreaming? Are you finally going to be better to yourself? These words were somehow a bit choking. I reached out and touched my nose. After taking a breath, I leaned closer to her and lowered my voice. After entering the city, you quietly get off the carriage. Find a passerby, give her some silver and ask her to help me buy a dose of medicine. Jasper blinked and looked at me, asking seriously, what medicine? But I was blushed by her clear eyes. After coughing lightly, I turned my head away. Contraceptive decoction. Ah? 05 Since returning from the hunting ground, I made an excuse of recuperating from my injuries. I had been staying in the residence all the time, not seeing anyone. For a whole half a month, I was locked in the Buddhist hall every day, praying sincerely, Buddha bless, Buddha have mercy. It's been more than half a month. There is nothing unusual in the capital. Presumably it should be all right now, right? That young master should have chosen to silently endure this loss and won't come to find me again, right? After all, people who can appear in the royal hunting ground are either rich or noble. That young master must also be a prominent figure in the capital. If the matter of being bound and defiled by a woman spreads out, his face will also be lost. Miss, young Master Nathan's birthday banquet has sent you an invitation. Jasper suddenly pushed the door open and came in. Holding an invitation in her hand, her expression was subtle. She has always disliked me being so humble and liking Nathan. She always thinks it's not worth it for me. But at the same time, she also understands my infatuation and obsession the most. Alas, I originally thought that after that, young Master Nathan would be impatient to come to the door to break off the engagement. Unexpectedly, the engagement hasn't been broken off. Instead, the invitation to the birthday banquet has been sent to you for the first time on a whim. Looking at it this way, perhaps in young Master Nathan's heart, there is not entirely no Mississippi. I felt helpless and gave her a blank look. Do you believe what you say? Nathan hasn't come to the door yet. There can only be one reason. He has been stopped by his parents again. After all, the parents of both families are quite satisfied with this marriage. Nathan taking the initiative to send me an invitation this time should be because he can't come. So he simply invites me to the Nathan family. He wants to bring up breaking off the engagement again in public at the banquet. Jasper shrugged noncommittally and pursed her lips. Anyway, I'll still give you this invitation. If you still have thoughts about young Master Nathan, this may really be a good opportunity to make up. I don't want you to regret later that you didn't go to find him, didn't. There is no later, Jasper. I gently lowered my eyes and interrupted her. There will be no later between me and Nathan. It's not just because I lost my virginity before marriage and lost my innocence. It's also because the feeling of weightlessness when I fell made me suddenly feel a kind of relief. A relief so great that when I let go of my obsession and felt like crying with relief. So relieved that I thought at that time, forget it, Arya. Really, forget it. Love and such things are not important anymore. Gently putting my arm around Jasper's shoulder, I pretended to be relieved and smiled. Hiding and surviving is the top priority for me now. You just remember that not to mention Nathan, even if the Jade Emperor invites me. Your miss will definitely not step out of the Buddhist hall even half a step. Ah. A dart glowing with cold light suddenly plunged into the cattail hassock I was kneeling on along with the end of my words. The cold and sharp blade was only half a finger away from my knee. There was a note clearly stuck on the dart. There were not many words, just 2 lines. At 4:15 in the afternoon, on the 2nd floor of Yaya Pavilion. Under the cliff at night, there is a score to settle. Signature, Maxwell. 6th Prince, Maxwell. Maxwell, the prince who holds the Iron Guards of Kyoto, is extremely powerful and ambitious. Leaning back feebly, I raised my head with a face ashen and looked at the Bodhisattva with a compassionate expression. It turns out that I have been worshipping for more than half a month. In the end, you didn't bless me with anything at all? Thanks to Miss Arya. The entire 2nd floor of Yaya Pavilion has been cleared. Maxwell is wearing a black regular robe embroidered with gold. His slender and fair fingers tap gently on the table. With such a clear and handsome face that is enough to amaze everyone, his expression is cold and solemn, exuding a chilling aura. That night when suppressing bandits in Shishan Mountain, this king had just experienced a bloody battle and was already exhausted and injured. Miss Arya's sudden attack made this king extremely angry and aggravated his injuries. It took me half a month to recuperate after returning to the capital, so I delayed until today to find Miss Arya. Settle the score. Almost immediately, the words "if I can't kill you, I am not worthy to be called a human" from that night appeared in my mind again. The familiar bone-chilling coldness crept up my spine. Immediately, it numbed my skull. I wonder if in this half-month, has Miss Arya thought about how to give this king an explanation? Plop! Following the end of Maxwell's words, I knelt down extremely neatly and sincerely. I cowed out heavily on the ground with great sincerity. That night, I was plotted against and unintentionally offended your highness. I deserve to die. I beg your highness to spare me considering my situation was excusable. If your highness needs anything in the future, the Ministry of Revenue's residents will do its best to help. I know I have a chance to survive. Otherwise, that dart last night could have killed me directly. The reason for not doing so? I guess it might be because of my father who is the Minister of Revenue and my mother who is a princess by birth. The current emperor is old and weak, but he has not appointed a crown prince. The third Prince Leo and the sixth Prince Maxwell are the most likely candidates to contend for the throne. If Maxwell can get the help of my father, the Minister of Revenue, at this time, it will be like adding wings to a tiger. It sounds good. But your father once openly supported my third brother in the court. On what basis can Miss Arya make me believe that your father will sincerely change camps and stand by this king? Maxwell curled his lips and smiled faintly, his expression neither happy nor angry. Just by your words? 08I. The sincerity I had prepared earlier suddenly lost its credibility in the face of this rhetorical question. I opened my mouth and wanted to say that the third prince appoints people based on personal connections and is sinister. My father has been considering switching allegiance recently. But indeed, this promise is currently empty and has no weight at all. Unless, marriage alliance. Maxwell spoke lightly and pointed out the way to break the deadlock. As he raised his eyebrows slightly, he was lazy yet domineering. If this king marries Miss Arya, your father will naturally be tacitly consent to stand by this king. Without having to prove it, it is already trustworthy enough. However, Maxwell paused as he said this and gently put down his teacup. He raised his eyebrows and glanced at me, his expression full of meaning. This king has heard that Miss Arya and the young master of the Prime Minister's family, Nathan, have had an engagement since childhood? And in the past half-month, it seems that Miss Arya has no intention of breaking off the engagement. Are you planning to still marry Nathan after taking advantage of this king? Truly deep affection and unwavering infatuation. In that case, this king will not force you. I really feel like crying but have no tears. Can I say that I was going to break off the engagement, but Nathan hasn't come to the door yet, and I haven't dared to go out? But breaking off the engagement and marrying Maxwell? I dare not even more. Officials taking the wrong side in the struggle for the throne among princes happens in all dynasties. As long as they surrender sincerely enough when the new emperor ascends the throne, most of them have a chance to survive. But if I become the princess consort of the sixth prince, the situation will be different. Once Maxwell fails in contending for the throne in the future, our whole family will surely die. It seems that Miss Arya can't think of how to give this king an explanation today. Maxwell's gaze swept over my face. Seeing that I didn't seem to have any intention of speaking, he suddenly smiled and raised his lips. His smile was handsome and captivating but terrifying and without a trace of warmth. Then let's settle the debt of that night in this king's way, how about it? Come. The door was pushed open immediately. The cold-faced secret guards in black led an old man carrying a medicine chest and walked in slowly. Maxwell turned his head and raised his eyebrows at me. My subordinates checked all the pharmacies in the city the day before yesterday and did not find any record of Miss Arya buying contraceptive decoction. Why? Is Miss Arya too nervous and forgot to buy it? Or are you so confident that you won't get pregnant that night? No. I drank it. I was so scared that cold sweat was about to come down. I subconsciously explained, I asked someone to help me buy contraceptive. My words suddenly stopped. The temperature around me disappeared in an instant, and I was completely stunned. Jasper also suddenly took a step forward and supported my back with her hand. Her hand was also trembling badly. I guess she may have also realized the problem that we have ignored for a long time. Obviously, I drank 3 doses of contraceptive soup after that night. but my menstruation seems to have never come. Calculating up to now, it has been delayed for nearly 10 days? Maxwell took in my reaction completely. His thin lips curled up gently. Whether Miss Arya drank it or not is actually not important. What's important is that this king will not allow the possibility of you being pregnant with my child and marrying someone else. So, Qingfeng. As Maxwell spoke, he raised his hand and crooked his finger at the black-clothed secret guard behind him. The secret guard named Qingfeng immediately stepped forward and forcibly pulled my wrist onto the table. The fingers of the old man then pressed on my pulse. Miss Arya, how about taking a gamble? Maxwell leaned lazily on the back of the chair, raised his eyebrows and looked at me. If Miss Arya is not pregnant, the matter of that night will be written off. This king will not only stop pursuing it anymore, but will also personally send a wedding gift to Miss Arya and young Master Nathan. But if pregnancy is diagnosed, I swallowed with difficulty. Forcing myself to stay calm, I looked up and asked, then, what? Maxwell smiled and raised his lips. The smile was cold and murderous. Kill both the mother and the child. Let's do it all today. Withdraw. Without hesitation for even half a moment, I immediately pulled my wrist out of Imperial Physician Wang's hand. Looking up at Maxwell, there's no need for pulse diagnosis. I will go to the Nathan family to break off the engagement tomorrow. Waiting for the prince to come and propose marriage, Maxwell raised his hand and added some hot tea to the cup. When the teacup was leisurely brought to his mouth, he smiled and said, "Is Miss Arya sure it's not forced? You know, this king has always been the most reluctant to force others." A smile immediately piled up on my face. My eyes were filled with sincerity. Not forced, not forced. It is my honor to marry the prince. Who would have thought that by accident? Nathan's birthday banquet, I still came after all. When I arrived, the banquet hadn't started yet. The guests were scattered in the garden chatting. Nathan was also among them, but his eyes always seemed to glance at the door vaguely. So that as soon as I stepped into the yard, I looked up and met his gaze. The deep darkness in those eyes made me stunned for a moment. But Nathan pursed his lips and seemed to be relieved inexplicably. After pausing for a moment, he walked towards me. I thought, "Happy birthday." The ink-colored brocade box was presented in front of Nathan, interrupting his unfinished words. I smiled slightly, leaned forward and approached him. In his surprised gaze, I lowered my voice. "I think you don't lack anything. This year, I won't give you those vulgar things of gold and jade. Inside this brocade box are our marriage contract and your 8-character gung tie. After today's banquet, we can discuss withdrawing." My wrist was suddenly grabbed forcefully. Nathan's pupils suddenly shrank sharply. Looking at me incredulously, his lips parted several times but he said nothing. Only the strength of holding my wrist tightened even more. "What's wrong?" I asked with a blink of confusion. "Today is not suitable." Nathan took a few deep breaths. His Adam's apple rolled up and down. His voice was extremely stiff. "Change it." What's suitable or not suitable about this? I didn't quite understand. After the banquet is over at night, I'll find Uncle Nathan with you and explain things clearly. When the marriage contract is torn up and my birthday gung tie is returned to me, won't it be over? Nathan's face became even uglier. His voice was lower and gloomier than ever. "I say it's not suitable and it's not suitable. But I'm a bit impatient." I couldn't help covering my face and became even more confused. "Didn't you look forward to withdrawing before? Why are you being so indecisive when it comes to it?" Nathan was speechless and showed an expression of restlessness and difficulty in speaking. "Anyway, not today. Later." I was really anxious. How can there be a later? "I'm all ready." "Are young Master Nathan and Miss Arya arguing?" A warm and gentle voice suddenly rang out in the pavilion not far away. Both Nathan and I were stunned. Looking up, we saw third Prince Leo sitting on a stone bench, looking at us with a smile. I don't know how long he has been watching. And beside him, Maxwell rested his elbow on the table and his index finger on his temple. His expression was casually lazy. His gaze swept over quietly. Finally, it fell on the hand that Nathan was holding my wrist. His thin lips curled up slightly, smiling meaningfully. 11. My breathing suddenly tightened. I quickly stepped back and pulled my wrist out of Nathan's hand. Not noticing his lost and disappointed expression, I only hastily curtsied towards the pavilion. I pay my respects to the two princes. Miss Arya doesn't need to be so polite. The third prince smiled gently and nodded at me. Last time Miss Arya was plotted against at my banquet. It should be me who apologizes to Miss Arya. The surrounding guests had already fallen silent. But my heart sank heavily. After the incident, my father had investigated. The person who wanted to help me into the carriage and take me away was Kai Hang, the son of the Minister of Revenue. And the Minister of Revenue is someone in the camp of the third prince. The banquet set by the third prince, the people of the third prince. It seems that the poetry gathering that night was a hangmen banquet aimed at me from the very beginning. Presumably, the third prince must have also noticed that father has gradually been reluctant to work for him recently. And Nathan's father, Prime Minister Nathan, has always been neutral and doesn't side with any prince. So he thought of using this means to make me break off my engagement with Nathan and marry Kai Hang instead. In this way, father can continue to be used by him. But I don't understand. That night Kai Hang didn't succeed. What is the third prince doing by bringing up that night's incident in public now? Oh, look at what I've done. Very suddenly, the third prince seemed to have just realized that he had attracted attention. He apologized and smiled at the guests around. Really sorry. I didn't mean to disturb everyone's pleasure. Just now I vaguely heard that Mr. Nathan and Miss Arya seemed to be arguing about breaking off the engagement. I'm a bit worried. Is it because Miss Arya was drugged with aphrodisiac at the banquet I held that night, and Mr. Nathan is resentful about this? So I spoke up to try to dissuade them. After all, it wasn't Miss Arya's fault that night. Don't blame me, everyone. You can continue to drink and enjoy yourselves. After these words, who still has the mind to continue drinking? There were immediate discussions everywhere, and everyone's looks at me changed one after another. Aphrodisiac? Isn't that an aphrodisiac drug? Hasn't Arya lost her virginity before marriage? At that time, Arya disappeared over the cliff for an entire night. Maybe she was in a coma or endured it by herself. You're stupid. Have you ever heard of anyone who was drugged with aphrodisiac and could endure it without a man? That's right. Didn't you hear what the third prince said? Nathan is talking about breaking off the engagement with her. I think she must have lost her virginity. Now that you mention it, I remember. When we found Arya, she ran out of the forest in a panic. Her clothes were in a mess. It really seemed like. I know the purpose of the third prince, to destroy my engagement and reputation and cut off my way to get married. I have no other choice but to marry Kai Hang. Ouch. The hand that was restraining my wrist suddenly lost its sense of proportion and strength, making me frown in pain. But Nathan's face was even uglier than mine. In the bottom of his ink-colored eyes, there was a violent trembling that I couldn't understand. Obviously, he finally realized belatedly what it meant when he didn't send me home that night but pushed me to others. It's just as you think. In a voice that only the two of us could hear, I smiled helplessly at Nathan. Congratulations, Nathan. You finally got what you wanted. I will never pester you again. It's just a pity. I was still thinking that I could break off the engagement more gracefully. Since things have come to this, let's just announce the breaking off of the engagement in public now. Just say that I lost my virginity before marriage and you are. The third prince heard wrong. Nathan's Adam's apple rolled up and down, and his chest heaved twice violently. Suddenly he opened his mouth and looked at the two people in the pavilion. When he raised his eyes, his emotions had been completely hidden, and he said calmly as usual, I have no intention of breaking off the engagement with Miss Arya. How about September 18th? Maxwell, who had been watching the show with amusement, spoke slowly at this time. He gently skimmed off the tea stalk in the cup with the cup lid. His indifferent eyes lifted leisurely and looked at me. Is it a bit too hasty? I was slightly stunned and then shook my head. No. The prince can decide. Good. Maxwell raised his eyebrows and nodded. took a sip of tea, come over after talking with Mr. Nathan. I've cooled the tea for you. As soon as these words came out, there was silence. Everyone then realized in surprise that in front of the empty seat beside Maxwell, at some point, there was a cup of tea. The third prince reacted the fastest. His expression darkened a little. He pretended to be puzzled and asked, "What does sixth brother mean by this?" "What it means is," Maxwell raised his eyebrows and put down the cup. His voice was cold, "the person who relieved Miss Aria's drug that night under the cliff. It was me." The whole place was in an uproar. Nathan's eyes trembled violently and his body suddenly froze. And the warm and kind expression that the third prince always wore on his face also cracked for a moment. "Sixth brother, this joke can't be made casually. How could you save Miss Aria under the cliff if you didn't even go to the hunting ground? Even if you want to protect Miss Aria's reputation, you have to consider the dignity of the royal family. The third brother is meddling a bit too much." Maxwell spoke coldly and sneered, "That night was a private matter between me and Miss Aria. As long as Miss Aria admits it, it's fine. Whether the third brother admits it or not doesn't seem to be important, right? If you have doubts, don't waste words here. Go and check. Check carefully if it was me that night. You." The third prince was so angry that he was speechless. After saying "you" twice, he couldn't continue. Maxwell didn't pay attention either. He looked at me and Nathan again. With a calm expression but with a hidden meaning. "Can you propose marriage tomorrow? Can we settle this today?" "Yes." I quickly nodded. "No." Nathan, who had been stunned since Maxwell spoke, finally seemed to come to his senses. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his eyes panicked and confused. "We can't settle it. The good birthday banquet ended because of this farce." It was hard on the parents of the two families who came late. Obviously, they didn't know the situation clearly and were full of questions. But they still had to maintain dignity and send off the guests and deal with the aftermath in the front hall. Nathan and I were left in the back hall, sitting in silence opposite each other. "I thought you were just drunk back then." Nathan was silent for a long while. His Adam's apple rolled, and finally he spoke with difficulty. I nodded and my tone was light. "I know." But Nathan seemed even more panicked. He shook his head and said, "I didn't expect someone to dare to use such despicable means at a royal banquet. You just don't like me." I gently spoke and finished the half sentence he hadn't said. "That's all? So Nathan, it's really not your fault. Whether it was that night or the annulment of the engagement now. Nathan is not at fault. Not liking someone is never wrong. Here." I pushed the brocade box in front of Nathan again. "Congratulations, you are free." But Nathan didn't take it. He lowered his eyes and his expression was unreadable. His voice was very low. "I just haven't thought it through yet." "Huh?" I was stunned and confused. What? Once I really thought I wanted to annul the engagement. Yes, we were childhood sweethearts and very happy, but I only regarded you as a younger sister. The standard of the woman I want to spend my life with is completely different from you. But they made the decision on their own and directly set my future as you. Why? So I hate that engagement and firmly believe that I don't like you." As Nathan spoke, he slowly raised his head in a daze. There was clearly visible confusion and helplessness in his eyes. "But when I saw you being taken away, I was suddenly very angry. Angry at his hands holding you, and angry that you actually allowed him to take you away. When you fell off the cliff, things happened very quickly. It was just a blink of an eye." Lifting his palm and pressing it against his heart, Nathan frowned tightly. But at that moment, I felt my heart stop. An overwhelming panic almost drowned me. "I know you are angry and resent me, so you don't let me send you off and also say you want to annul the engagement." At that time, I really didn't believe it. I even firmly believed that in a few days you would still pester me like before and couldn't be driven away. But you never came again. And I found myself becoming absent-minded and inexplicably thinking of you. I don't know if it's because of habit. After being pestered by you for so many years and suddenly being free, I'm not used to it for a while. The fingers pressing on the brocade box tightened suddenly. Nathan didn't finish that sentence. Just looking at me, his chest heaved violently a few times. Arya, don't marry. Don't annul the engagement. Wait a little longer. Wait for me, okay? I will soon figure out what that uncomfortable emotion really is. What then after you see clearly? I sneered coldly. If you love me, I will happily wait for you and you can fulfill the engagement and marry me? And if it's not love? What if you still only regard me as a sister as before and that discomfort is just due to habit? What should I do? In the end, my tone rose uncontrollably. Unconsciously, my eyes reddened. Now everyone knows that I lost my virginity before marriage. You want me to wait for you. But will Maxwell wait for me? When the time comes, you pat your head and say that you have thought it through. You still only regard me as a sister and you won't marry me. What should I do with myself then? Nathan's expression suddenly froze. He stood up in a panic. I will marry you. I want to marry you. Even if I only regard you as a sister, I will still marry you. You don't have to marry Maxwell. In the end, Nathan couldn't continue. Because the look in my eyes towards him was too cold and too disappointed. Chasing after you for 7 years. Whether it's unrequited love or sadness and disappointment, it's all the path I chose. Not liking me is not your fault. But it's the greatest insult to my 7 years of devotion when you start thinking about whether you love me or not only after I give up on you. So, Nathan, don't see clearly. Really, you should never see clearly forever. Just keep believing that you only regard me as a sister. Keep believing that you hate me and don't regret it for a lifetime. Nathan's body trembled suddenly. For no reason, redness appeared in the bottom of his eyes. His fists were clenched tightly at his sides and blue veins popped up on the back of his hands. I lowered my eyes and was silent for a few breaths. Then I turned around and walked towards the door. I didn't hear that suppressed response after a long time. But what if I can't do it? What if I really regret it in the future? My engagement with Maxwell is really set on September 18th, 3 months later. The time is not very abundant. To be exact, it should have been very urgent. In addition, my menstruation, which was more than 10 days late due to drinking too much contraceptive soup, finally came. I was in pain, tired. In addition, my menstruation, which was more than 10 days late due to drinking too much contraceptive soup, finally came. I was in pain, tired and sleepy. So much so that while I was eating, I actually fell asleep. The chopsticks dropped on the table with a clatter and I buried my head in Maxwell's arms. According to Biyu's recollection, Maxwell's first reaction at that time was that I was poisoned and his face changed greatly. Just as he was about to call Qingfeng, he heard my even and slightly snoring. I can't describe what expression was on the prince's face at that time. It seemed like he was smiling, and it seemed like he wasn't. But he didn't wake you up. Instead, he carefully asked us all to leave. He let you sleep in his arms for a full 3 hours. Biyu described it vividly, but when I heard it, I just wanted to cover my face. Suddenly, I felt that it would have been better to choose death instead of choosing to marry him at that time. But after that day, Maxwell sent several nannies in charge of wedding ceremonies from the palace to come and take away most of my trivial matters. Thank you, my lord. The streets on the flower festival are extremely lively. I am holding a lantern and thanking Maxwell. Perhaps it's because we have been meeting frequently recently to eat and taste dishes together. Or perhaps it's because the marriage is settled and I no longer worry that Maxwell will kill me. After getting along for some time, I found that Maxwell who doesn't talk about serious matters and doesn't hide his thoughts with a stern face. In private, when Maxwell relaxes, his personality is surprisingly easygoing and gentle, and the years are peaceful. Even more so than the third prince who is good at pretending to be kind. He is much more open and aboveboard. So in front of him, I gradually let go of my restraint and smiled easily and happily. If it weren't for the help of those nannies you sent, I definitely wouldn't have had time to come out today. Maxwell was wearing a black robe embroidered with gold. He stood with his hands behind his back on the busy street. His posture exuded a natural noble charm. He seemed to be in a good mood, with a faint smile on his lips. How will you thank me? Ah? I didn't expect Maxwell to pick up on this at all. I was stunned for a moment and then smiled. How about I go and ask for a lantern for you, my lord? The lantern shop at the street corner is famous in the capital for the lanterns it sells. It is said that making wishes on these lanterns is extremely effective. Those lanterns can't be easily bought. You have to ask for them. You have to write on the lantern surface yourself to get one. You have already asked for one just now. Maxwell raised his eyebrows and looked at me, his eyes teasing. The shopkeeper said that each person can only have one and you can't ask for more. It doesn't matter. I am very sweet talking. I will definitely be able to ask for one back for you. I chuckled and was about to turn around and go back to the street corner to ask for a lantern. But Maxwell gently pulled me. His other hand covered the wrist of mine that was holding the lantern and slowly raised it until the lantern was level with me and completely illuminated my face. I blinked in confusion and was about to ask, but then I saw Maxwell suddenly lean over. Using the lantern to block the sight of the crowd, he gently kissed my lips. The thank you gift is indeed very sweet. I was so shocked that my eyes widened. I stared blankly as Maxwell took the lantern from my hand and held it in his own hand. Then, he held that hand of mine in his palm and didn't let go again. My lord, and my lord. Fortunately, the night was deep and surrounded by colorful lanterns. No one could see my instantly blushing face. Maxwell gently uttered an In such a natural way, he led me by the hand and walked forward. Bu and the bodyguard Qingfeng followed behind us. They thought they were speaking in very low voices. But in fact, I heard everything clearly. Bu, did your lady just blush? Weren't you very bold back then? When she hugged my lord and said, young master, I want to kiss you. Ow. Just like your lord didn't coldly say that he would kill your lady and get rid of the child back then. Now isn't he still taking the initiative to hold your lady's hand? Oh, what do you mean by taking the initiative? They have already had physical contact. How heroic your lady was that night, but now she starts being reserved? It's been more than half a month after the proposal. Only now did they hold hands. Hey, look clearly. It was your lord who kissed my lady. My lady was poisoned that night. Your lord kisses and holds hands tonight. Why, is he poisoned too? My lord is cultivating feelings. They will soon become husband and wife. Can't they be more than strangers? My steps suddenly stopped. I couldn't help covering my face and looked at Maxwell sideways. Signaling with my eyes, don't you take care of this? But Maxwell pursed his lips and smiled gently, shrugging his shoulders. Qingfeng is highly skilled in martial arts. I don't dare to take care of this. For a moment, I was even amused and angry. Looking up, I coquettishly said, you clearly did this on purpose. The words suddenly stopped. My smile paused on my face and then disappeared. Maxwell raised his eyebrows in confusion and looked back following my line of sight. On the second floor of the restaurant opposite, the box window was wide open. Nathan was sitting by the window with a gloomy face. His eyes were dark and deep. I don't know how long he had been watching us. Sixth brother and sixth sister-in-law also come to visit the flower festival. On the other side of the window, the third prince appeared with a smile. Looking at the two of us meaningfully, oh, no, it should be prospective sixth sister-in-law. After all, the wedding hasn't happened yet. Right, young Master Nathan? Nathan pursed his lips. His gaze swept over Maxwell's hand holding mine. Something seemed to completely break in his eyes. But then again, it seemed that there was nothing. The Nathan family, which has always been neutral, joined the camp of the third prince. This news was told to me by my father. And Uncle Nathan didn't know about it in advance. Surprisingly, it was Nathan who made the decision on his own. His Majesty's health is getting weaker and weaker these days. I'm afraid his time is almost up. The struggle for the throne is about to come to an end. Is Nathan crazy to get involved at this time? As he spoke, I looked up at my father's grizzled beard and felt some guilt. If it weren't for my loss of virginity before marriage and being forced to be tied to Maxwell, Now father wouldn't have to face such a dangerous life and death situation. Arya, court affairs are not as simple as you think. Father chose Chiyu for his own considerations. It's not all for you. You don't need to blame yourself. But father smiled and patted my head lovingly, just. Your uncle Nathan hopes you can help persuade Nathan. Now I'm afraid only you can persuade that child. I couldn't help being stunned, me? Well, father nodded, sighed helplessly with an expression on his face. That child Nathan is always silent and reserved. He hides everything in his heart. The third prince tried to win him over many times before but didn't succeed. This time he suddenly changed his mind and decided to side with the third prince. Your uncle Nathan asked for a long time but didn't find out the reason. Only know that the day he changed his mind and agreed to cooperate with the third prince was the flower festival. Suddenly, my expression paused. I blinked in confusion. The flower festival? 19 Yes, that day. Nathan sat dejectedly in front of the desk. Most of the wine in the wine pot on the desk had been drunk. He looked up at me drunkenly, his smile bitter. At the moment Maxwell kissed you. At the moment he held your hand. I clearly saw my heart. I have never understood a thought so clearly. I want to kill him. I want to take back everything that should have been done by me and you. So when the third prince reminded me that you haven't gotten married yet, I was tempted. I agreed to his cooperation. The wine pot fell to the ground with a thud, splashing fragments everywhere. Nathan suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my arm. The always gentle, elegant, neat and modest young gentleman now looked like a crazy person who was trapped in an obsession. As long as the third prince wins the struggle for the throne and ascends the throne, Maxwell will surely die. Your engagement is not valid anymore. None of the betrothal gifts or wedding dates count. Having known each other for many years, I have never seen Nathan like this, so crazy. Terror showed in my eyes and I took 2 steps back. But Nathan then leaned forward and grabbed my arm very hard. Arya, I see clearly. I think clearly. I am fond of you. I like you. It's still in time. You haven't married him yet. Everything is still in time. As he spoke, Nathan seemed to suddenly remember something and picked up a marriage horoscope from the desk. This is your 8-character marriage horoscope. I didn't return it to you at that time. Our engagement is still there. It's still there. As I stepped out of the study, I lowered my head and let out a long sigh. Looking up again, I bumped into Maxwell's smiling and gentle eyes. Why is my lord here at the Nathan family? I ran up to him and asked in surprise. Maxwell looked down at me and smiled softly. The Prime Minister Nathan let me in. After all, my fiancé is here. I came because Nathan joined the third prince. Pursing my lips, I still decided to explain. Maxwell was not surprised. I know. Judging from his eyes on the flower festival, I guessed it. I was stunned. You guessed it long ago? Then why not? Because it's good. Maxwell smiled faintly and interrupted me. His eyes were full of deep softness. With him on the third brother's side, even if I lose in the future, at least you can live. He will definitely treat you well. My steps suddenly stopped. I angrily turned back to look at him. Before I could say the words "I will accompany you in life and death," Maxwell had already held my hand. Let's go. The cool autumn wind blew, rolling up the slightly yellowing leaves in the yard. Bu and Qingfeng started arguing again behind us. Ow. Now someone can see that his lord likes my lady more. Oh. Didn't you hear what your lady just said to Nathan? If my lord loses, she will accompany him to die. My lady must be doing this out of righteousness. She liked young Master Nathan for so many years. She has only known your lord for more than 3 months. How can it be so fast? Oh ho, accompanied by Qingfeng's schadenfreude. Maxwell suddenly curled his lips and coldly hee-heed. I, on the other hand, gritted my teeth and turned back, glaring at Bu. Are you trying to kill me? Bu knew she was in the wrong and quickly made a gesture of putting her hands together to me. I was wrong. I closed my eyes tightly and took a few deep breaths. Looking back again, I had already put on an extremely flattering smile. My lord, Have you heard of meeting late and one glance being worth 10,000 years? Or have you heard of growing fondness over time and having a long future ahead? Or have you heard of correcting mistakes when realizing them and there is no greater goodness? My lord, don't walk so fast. After this, I never saw Nathan again. The third prince's side still made big moves, forming cliques for personal gain and winning over powerful officials. He was in a fierce battle with Maxwell in the court and was evenly matched. But the emperor was still able to remain calm. Although he was so seriously ill that he almost had to rely on medicinal soup to sustain his life, he still did not establish the crown prince. Until the day of my grand wedding with Maxwell. Miss, young Master Nathan has sent you a wedding gift. The marriage of princes is different from folk weddings. Maxwell and I had to sit in the same carriage and circle the city to receive the blessings and worship of the subjects. After finally arriving at the gate of Maxwell's palace after a long and shaky journey, Bu handed over a gift list with a subtle expression and lowered her voice. 2 whole courtyards full. They have already been sent into the palace. When this servant looked at it, the quantity of the gifts seems wrong. It seems to be. Bu paused as she spoke. She secretly glanced at Maxwell. Maxwell was wearing a red embroidered with gold. His black hair was tied up high. Sitting in the carriage with his eyes closed and not speaking. It made me feel as if I was back at the first time I saw him at the Yueyao Tower. That cold and solemn, imposing aura. The oppressive feeling that he could take someone's life with a flick of his finger at any time. Bu, why are you looking at me? I am just the husband that Miss Arya married out of righteousness. I can't compare to young Master Nathan who has been childhood sweethearts for more than 10 years. Suddenly, the sound of clattering horse hooves rang out at the street corner, saving my life. A eunuch shouted loudly, holding a bright yellow imperial decree in his hand. The imperial decree is here. His Majesty is pleased by the 6th prince's grand wedding. He specially sent this old servant to bring a gift. Everyone, listen to the decree. The people, guards, and maidservants all over the street knelt down one after another. Maxwell picked me up from the carriage and helped me kneel down as well. The 6th Prince Maxwell is virtuous and kind-hearted. Now he is specially established as the crown prince. After I pass away, he can directly succeed to the throne. The slightly shrill voice of the eunuch echoed throughout the entire street. The people kneeling all over the ground were all silent. I was also shocked and numb all over. The emperor has been waiting until now. He directly established the crown prince and also made a will. With this imperial decree, Maxwell's future ascension to the throne has become a foregone conclusion. The 3rd prince doesn't even have room to struggle and fight for it. My lady. Maxwell received the imperial decree with both hands. After kowtowing and expressing gratitude, he looked at me sideways and raised his eyebrows and smiled. I have won. The red candles lit up the warm tent. The spring night is short. But my wedding night was clearly not going to be easy. The gift list sent by Nathan was spread out on the table. Maxwell glanced at the total amount at the bottom of the list and coldly curled his lips. My lady, what a coincidence. The total amount of the wedding gift sent by young Master Nathan is exactly the same as the betrothal gift amount when I proposed to you. The phoenix crown was already weighing down on my neck so much that it was almost breaking. What Maxwell said made my head even bigger. The amount of the wedding gift is the same as the betrothal gift? What is Nathan thinking? He is using the name of a wedding gift to propose to you. Maxwell's cold voice with a hint of chill rang out from beside me. The hand on my waist also secretly exerted some force. In this way, it can be considered that he has also married you. Surely worthy of the affection of being childhood sweethearts for many years. Tilting my head and making a tsk sound, I really wanted to cry but had no tears. Can't we just let this go? If my lord doesn't like it, I will send someone to return it right away. Is that okay? You can decide for yourself, my lady. Maxwell raised his eyebrows and sneered. You have known young Master Nathan for several years. I have only known you for a few months. How can I decide for you? Return it. Return it right away. I will ask Bu to return it all tomorrow. unable to bear the weight of the phoenix crown any longer. I let out a long breath and fell into Maxwell's arms. Looking up at him, I smiled. Young master, I am a little tired. Can I borrow your bed to rest? Or, can I borrow a hug from you? Maxwell turned his face away and chuckled. In the next moment, he suddenly bent down and picked me up horizontally and walked towards the bed. And at the corner, the whispers of two people could be heard again. Oh, listen. This time it's your lady who took the initiative. Ow. Your lord isn't injured this time, right? Didn't he still give in? My lord. Seems to really like your lady. TSK. Yes. I win. Humph. However, it seems that my lady also likes your lord a little bit. Then I win too. Humph.